I am very glad to be joined by former Arkansas governor and presidential candidate, bass guitarist, and most importantly, grandfather of six, Governor Mike Huckabee. Governor, great to see you. Thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure, John. Thank you for having me today.
And the governor is, of course, a best-selling author. He has a new book out titled Rare, Medium, or Done Well, Make the Most of Your Life. And Governor, we have a lot to talk about with your new book, but first, I really want to get your take on some of the important news of the day. Now, let's begin with the clashes at the border. You recently said, if they don't want to come to this country to be Americans, then I don't have a lot of sympathy. I agree with you. What's your overall take on these clashes at the border, Governor?
Well, I think we've now seen this is an invasion. This is not just some orderly immigration process. And a few weeks ago, there were reporters at the White House who were saying to the president, I challenge you, Mr. President. And first of all, I thought that was out of line. But the whole point that was being made by one of the more self-centered narcissist reporters was that there was no invasion. Nobody was massing at the borders. They were weeks, if not months away, and nobody was trying to break through the wall. Well, it turns out that reporter was wrong and the president was right. And when people are seeking asylum, they come with a level of humility. They come with a level of desperation. When you have people throwing chunks of concrete and rocks at law enforcement officials in the United States, those aren't people who are desperately seeking asylum. Those are people who are demanding that they have what Americans have by their constitutional authority. And no person outside the U.S. has a constitutional right to live in America. They just don't. By the way, I don't have a constitutional right to live in France or Australia or Zimbabwe, for that matter. I still have to go through the process of immigration. I travel all over the world. I've been to probably 70 countries across the globe, and I've never been to one that didn't ask for my passport, wanted to know why I was there, and wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to be there permanently, probably for a lot of good reasons, frankly, that they didn't want me there forever. But my point is, there's no country on earth that just has these open borders. Why should we?
Yeah, no, look, I agree with you. Every traveler, every American who travels has had to show their passport, and in some countries you're interrogated. Now, many Americans, many followers of Donald Trump supporters want a wall. Well, Chuck Schumer said yesterday that the Democrats' position is they would be open to okaying $1.6 billion for that physical barrier with Mexico. The president, of course, Governor, wants $5 billion. Trump is threatening another government shutdown over this funding. What's your take on the president's strategy?
I think he's not bluffing, and I think he shouldn't bluff. I think he ought to shut it down if that's what it requires, which, by the way, let's be real clear, 70% of the government is funded through 2019. So if this so-called shutdown were to happen, it's not going to be as noticeable as some of the previous shutdowns of the government. And in fact, I'm not sure we'll miss the 30% that much that we will have closed. But if that's what it takes to get Chuck Schumer and the Democrats to understand that we want to do what Chuck Schumer does at his home, and that's lock our doors at night. We're not an anti-immigrant group of people. This country was made great by immigrants and immigration and people who came and brought their talents and their skills and their ambitions to this nation. But what we're not is a nation that acts like a bunch of chumps and fools. And for the same reason that we do lock our doors and windows at night, for the same reason that we don't just answer our door to a total stranger and invite them in to use the phone without having a little understanding of who they are, for that same reason, we have a right and responsibility to know who's coming through our borders, why they're coming, what they're going to do when they get here, and to make sure that they don't bring with them a communicable disease or a criminal intent. And if we don't do that, we're not a very smart country.
Look, I truly believe most Americans feel as you do, Governor. So why is it that Republicans are the ones most often blamed for government shutdowns or impending shutdowns? Blame never seems to fall on the Democrats. Why is that?
Well, John, I think it's pretty simple. The media is controlled by people who are left of center, people who hate Donald Trump, and for the most part hate conservatives and Republicans. Yeah. And so they're never going to paint this this issue in a fair and objective way. I mean, a good example is when the pictures of tear gas going off at the border, which, by the way, saved lives because there was no lethal force employed. They forgot to mention that like 186 times the Obama administration had employed exactly the same tactics to keep people from just rushing through our borders. But the networks, in fact, by analysis, gave zero attention to the fact that this has been going on since 2010. 2013, the Obama administration did use tear gas. And frankly, that's way better than using lethal bullets to keep people from coming through that border.
Yeah, sure is. My background is law enforcement, and it's a common and effective tactic, Governor. All right, let's move on and talk about your new book, Rare, Medium, or Done Well, Make the Most, of your life. Whether in politics, family, education, or business, you say what matters most is leaving a legacy for future generations. And you say that writing this book was therapeutic for you. How so?
Well, it was because, I was thinking about what matters in life. I was the first male in my entire family lineage to graduate high school. My father, grandfather, great-grandfather, no male upstream from me had ever gotten out of high school. I could look at my life and say, I've done okay. Could have done better, maybe, but I've done okay. But the question is, what does that mean? What really does matter? And at the end of our lives, when people assess how well we've lived our lives, will they say of us that his life was basically undercooked, not fully developed? Was it rare? Was it medium? Which means it didn't do really bad things, but didn't do that many good things. His life was mediocre. Or will they say, here's a life that was really, truly done well? And I think that that's what we're looking for as individuals. Ultimately, I'm not going to be judged by the editorial board of the New York Times, thank God. I'm not going to be judged by even voters who might on any given day be mad at me for one thing or another. I'm going to be judged by my Creator, who made me, knows me best, loves me most, and who will be quite fair and just in his evaluation. And it's when I stand before him that I want to make sure that, that I get the 6 words that I think we ought to live for. Well done, good and faithful servant. If we hear those words from him, we've lived a good life.
So, Governor, specifically, what legacy would you like to leave behind for your children, for those 6 grandchildren of yours? What would you like them to remember about Governor Mike Huckabee?
Well, it's some of the things that I mentioned in the book, things like a sense of humor, which means you have a perspective about life. As I like to say it in one of the chapters, take God seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. I know too many people who do the opposite. A second thing, learn that hard work never kills anybody, but lack of it will really leave you wanting. Be honest with other people. Treat people right. It's the golden rule. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. A lot of people think that success in life is about how much money you accumulate. One of the chapters in the book that I like to call, It's the Money, Honey. And the whole point of it is, I don't care how much money you make, that won't make you happy. I see people all the time, John, who are remarkably happy, but they don't have much. And then I see people who are, I've met billionaires, and they seem to be miserable because they always wanted something they didn't have.
You're a man of great faith. There are a lot of religious undertones in the book. You talk a bit about the 10 Commandments and how they actually depict love. What led you to this idea, and what was it like exploring the undercurrent of love through each commandment?
Well, I think sometimes people see the 10 Commandments as negatives. Don't do this, don't do that. But it's like a parent who tells his child, don't run in the street, don't put 2 keys in the electrical socket at the same time. There's some things that we tell our kids that they are going to see, because they're children, as negative. How come I can't have ice cream for breakfast? How come I can't go climb on the roof and play in high places? And the point is, there's a difference between the perspective of a parent and the perspective of a 5-year-old. What I think we've got to do as adults and as human beings is realize that if we do have a Heavenly Father, maybe He tells us not to do some things. It's not because He's mad at us. It's not because He's wanting to keep us from fun. He wants to preserve us so that our lives can be fulfilled. If He tells us, for example, not to steal, is that because He doesn't want us to have stuff? No. It's because he knows that stealing someone else's property not only enrages that person, but it also gives us a false sense of ownership of something we didn't work for and have no right to have.
Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee. Again, the book is Rare, Medium, or Done Well. Make the most of your life. You can find it just about anywhere you buy books. Governor, pleasure to have you. Thanks so much for being here today.
John, it is my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more breaking news coverage, exclusive interviews, and great videos, click over here to our YouTube channel and subscribe. And don't forget to download the free Newsmax TV app. Newsmax TV, it's real news for real people.